One of the things that I found so extraordinary over the course of the last few weeks is the total inability of many of our parliamentarians and leading politicians to speak out clearly on what was happening. Whenever they talk about threats to MPs, they say, well, of course, there's the far right and there's the Islamist extremists. But actually, what has really been happening over the course of the last couple of weeks, and those abominable scenes that we saw in Parliament Square, the flashing up on the Elizabeth Tower that houses Big Ben off from the river to the sea, and folks, we know what that means. It's not just the abolition of Israel, it's the abolition of their people as well. What has stunned me about all of this is so few people have really spoken out. It's as if fear has been stalking the corridors of Westminster as sectarianism in British politics starts to become mainstream. And one of those who I think has been very slow to the party is the Prime Minister. But last night, he gave a speech to a Jewish group, so a predominantly Jewish audience, at which he said, and in a sense, this rather follows on from what Suella Braverman has been writing in the newspapers. He said, mob rule is replacing democratic rule. Well, too bloomin' right. Because it isn't just Parliament. We've seen council meetings where hordes of people come in. We saw a Conservative fundraising dinner last weekend in Stoke-on-Trent. And this level of intimidation from people who seem to have very little respect for the idea that we change things in this country by having a verbal punch-up. We then accept the result. And the whole thing has felt very intimidatory, and much of what has been said and chanted at the marches really very worrying. But he puts this down and says the police must shut down intimidatory protests. But what do you do if you're 150 police officers and there are 10,000 very angry people in front of you? How practically can this be done now that effectively the cat is out of the bag? I'm joined by Kevin Hurley, former Advanced Public Order Commander at the Metropolitan Police. Kevin, you know, of course, there have been criticisms of the police over the last few weeks that I personally believe are valid. How is it that nobody has been arrested for putting from the river to the sea on the Elizabeth Tower? How can the police have effectively turned a blind eye to that?
Well, there are all sorts of reasons. The first one is, at the very top, commanders are very, very scared, actually, to make the situation worse or to face criticism in any particular form. They certainly do not want, in this case, to be accused of being Islamophobic, as you've just discussed earlier on that programme. But actually, you made the good point, Nigel. How can you, with 150 people, deal with this? The fact of the matter is, the police require courts, they require prisons, they require probation to back them up if they make arrests. All of them have been cut and slashed, which effectively makes the police toothless when they come to make an arrest, because people walk out the door or they get a slap on the hand and that's the end of it. But when it comes to the practical elements of public order policing, the days have gone that we once had 20, 30, 40 years ago of putting large bodies of men up against groups of demonstrators, a bit of pushing and shoving, a bit of fisticuffs, and occasionally, in real terms, a baton flying through the air, to one now where we police totally different groups of people. Many of them come from other parts of the world where what we might call the traditional British policing techniques simply don't work. Many of the people you see on some of these demonstrations are used to being water cannons, sprayed with CS, or battened by their own police forces wherever they come from. So if we're realistic and we want the police to clear the streets and take them back, then we need to be talking about what we're seeing on the screen right now is water cannon. Because frankly, that's far less damaging, Nigel, than police officers battening people or kicking and punching them. And then we end up with those police officers being investigated years to come. And police officers actually don't want to do it anymore because they know they're going to be hung out to dry if they use excessive force. So why on earth would constables and sergeants want to get stuck in, as people call for it? And why would inspectors, chief inspectors, or indeed superintendents say, come on, let's get stuck in? They simply won't do it anymore. So we need to change the paradigm and look at what's being used elsewhere in the world.
And Kevin, for you personally, getting involved, dealing with public order offences, I guess, and we want our police officers to be brave, but they've also got to be realistic, haven't they, about what they can deal with at any one moment in time.
Yes, they have. And I mean, you're talking to someone who's led many baton charges, and I've struck many people with batons over the years, shouting stuff like, follow me or come with me to the people I'm in charge of. So I've done it. But there is a realistic situation, or you need to make an appraisal. Will you survive, or will you be battered down if you go forward? But the other issue is, what about the investigations when you're captured on camera and your actions taken in maybe 5 seconds or 10 seconds out of context make it look like you're really dishing it out unnecessarily when you can't get the full, if you like, picture of what's been going on in the last half an hour? So we need to keep the police distant from the crowd now, which is why we need to bring in water cannon.
Okay.
And we need to look at using sprays with CS and stuff like that. Protect our officers and distance them from the crowd and drive the crowds back.
Water cannon in France, we were showing some scenes whilst you were talking of the way demos in Paris are dealt with. Water cannons, though, don't stop protesters coming back, do they?
No, but what they do, they wash them away for that period in time, and they all run away. Now, you can add an irritant spray to that if you wish, which will stop them coming back, or you can actually put an index marker solution which shows up under ultraviolet light, so that as they disperse around the margins, you can then identify those who are present, match them up to the pictures, and then prosecute them for various public order offences.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
Bottom line, Nigel, if there are consequences, people think twice. So if you look at G4 or security vans these days, they've all got protected by smart water. And do you know what's happened? Armed robberies on cash in transit vans have all but stopped now, because people know that if you take the security box out, whoosh, you're covered in the spray. You can't get it off. It takes months to go. You can be identified and you get your time in prison.
Wow.
If we're serious, we need to be doing that and backing it up with court time and prison time. But of course, the prisons are full. So don't be
Kevin
surprised.
Hurley, I must say, I've enjoyed this chat enormously, because I was expecting you to say it's all really very, very difficult. But what you've actually done is offer some sensible, practical solutions that I think would carry overwhelming support in the country. Kevin Hurley, a pleasure to have you on the programme. Thank you.